September 12, 2018. Time, 2:34 a.m. The quiet of a sleepy suburban neighborhood was shattered when the police arrived at 22 Maple Avenue. They were called for something far from routine. The house, a small, well-kept bungalow, sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. Its freshly painted walls and manicured lawn made it look like the picture of domestic tranquility. But beneath the house, hidden in the shadows, was a secret far darker than anyone could imagine. Officer Ryan Daniels stood at the threshold, his eyes scanning the scene in disbelief. "This is strange," he muttered under his breath. He had seen crime scenes before, but nothing quite like this. Inside the house, a teenager sat on the couch, staring at the floor. His hands were shaking. His name was Jacob Williams, a 16-year-old high school sophomore. To anyone who knew him, he was just a normal kid. Quiet, a little reserved, but nothing that would ever suggest he could be involved in something so unimaginable. The story Jacob was about to tell would rock the entire town. It would leave everyone questioning the secrets that could lurk behind closed doors. Jacob's mother, a woman named Emily, had been missing for almost a week. No one had seen her, and no one had heard from her. At first, the disappearance seemed like a typical case, one of many in the quiet town. But something about Emily's sudden absence felt off. The police had no leads, no clues. And then came the call that changed everything. A neighbor reported hearing strange noises beneath the house late at night. It wasn't the usual creaks or groans of a house settling. These noises were louder, disturbing, almost like someone was digging. When the police arrived, they immediately began questioning Jacob. His response was chilling, "I don't know where she is." Jacob's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. But there was something else, something that made Officer Daniels uneasy. Jacob's eyes darted nervously toward the floor, almost as if he were hiding something. And in that moment, Officer Daniels realized that the case was no longer just about a missing person. They needed to search the house. The search began with the basement. It was a small, unfinished room, dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of old wood and earth. The officers began poking around, moving boxes and searching every corner. But it wasn't until they approached the back of the room that they discovered something strange. The floorboards in one corner were loose. As they pried them up, they found something even more unusual, a trapdoor. The door, hidden beneath layers of dust, had been carefully covered. And as they opened it, a musty, fetid smell wafted up from the depths below. It was the smell of decay. "Jacob!" Officer Daniels called, his voice laced with suspicion. "What's beneath this door?" Jacob didn't answer. His face was ashen, his mouth dry. He just stood there, unable to speak. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at the open trapdoor, his body trembling. "Jacob, we need to know what's down there," Officer Daniels said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Is it your mom?" The teen nodded slowly. It's her," he whispered, his voice cracking with fear. What they found beneath that trapdoor would haunt the town for years to come. Beneath the floorboards, hidden in a cramped crawl space, was a body. Emily Williams, Jacob's mother, was lying motionless, her face pale and her eyes wide open in a frozen expression of terror. Her body had been stuffed into a narrow, damp corner, her hands bound tightly with rope. The scene was horrific. A woman, trapped beneath her own home, left to die in the cold, dark space. And it was clear that this wasn't a sudden death. Emily had been held captive for days, possibly weeks, before her life was taken. The news spread like wildfire. The quiet, close-knit town of Brooksville was rocked by the discovery. People were horrified that such a thing could happen in their neighborhood. How could Jacob, a seemingly normal teenager, have been involved in something so horrific? It was impossible to fathom. But as the investigation continued, the truth began to unfold. Jacob's story was a twisted tale of secrecy, fear, and manipulation. He had been living in a nightmare, hiding the truth from everyone around him. But as the police dug deeper into his life, they uncovered a disturbing pattern of behavior. Jacob had been lying to everyone, including his own mother, for months. And it wasn't just about her disappearance. Emily's death, they would soon learn, was only the beginning. As the investigation progressed, the detectives uncovered more chilling details. Jacob had been hiding things beneath his mother's house long before her death. Over the years, he had dug secret tunnels in the basement, creating an underground labyrinth no one knew about. No one could explain why a teenager would go to such extreme lengths, but the more they learned about Jacob's behavior, the clearer it became that there was more to the story than anyone could have imagined. But what shocked the officers the most was the discovery of Emily's personal belongings hidden in the same crawl space. Letters, journals, and photographs, things that should have been kept in a safe place, away from the darkness, were scattered around her lifeless body. The more they dug, the more they uncovered. Jacob had been hiding pieces of his mother's life. And it wasn't just about hiding physical objects, it was as if he had been hiding her very existence. Emily Williams, it turned out, had been living in a kind of silent terror. She had known something was wrong with her son, but she had no idea just how deep the darkness ran. The police uncovered evidence that Jacob had been harboring disturbing thoughts for years, thoughts that were fed by a twisted obsession with power, control, and revenge. But the worst part? Emily had tried to escape, more than once. The tension continued to mount as Jacob was interrogated. His story began to unravel, and with each passing hour, the detectives discovered more pieces to the puzzle. Jacob's behavior, once thought to be typical teenage angst, now seemed like something much darker. In a chilling confession, Jacob admitted that his mother had discovered his secret, a secret that led to an inevitable confrontation. And in that moment of rage, something snapped. He had silenced her, hidden her away in the dark, cold space beneath their home. But he wasn't done. There was more. Much more. As the police closed in on the full extent of Jacob's crimes, they began to uncover even more horrifying truths. But with each revelation, they were left with even more questions. What had driven Jacob to this point? Was it something that happened in his past? Something that had been buried so deep that no one could have ever predicted it? The case was far from over. And as the investigation continued, one question loomed larger than any other. Was Jacob the only one with secrets to hide? It had been a week since Jacob Williams confessed to the horrific crime that had left the entire town of Brooksville in a state of shock. But as the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, it became clear that the truth was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The investigation, once thought to be a straightforward case of a troubled teenager turning violent, was spiraling into something darker, something no one was prepared for. In the dimly lit interrogation room, Officer Ryan Daniels sat across from Jacob, who had barely spoken since his confession. His eyes were empty, his expression vacant, as if he were a mere shell of the boy everyone had known. For a brief moment, Daniels wondered if this was the real Jacob, the boy who had hid his mother's lifeless body beneath the house, or if there was still something else beneath the surface. "Jacob," Daniels began, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity, "you said your mother discovered your secret. What secret was she referring to? What happened between you two that led to this?" Jacob didn't respond immediately. His hands, once trembling, were now calm, resting at his sides. His eyes flickered toward the floor as if weighing the decision to speak. Then, finally, he broke the silence. "It was the games," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't just dig the tunnels beneath the house. I buried things down there, things I couldn't let anyone find." Officer Daniels leaned in, his heart pounding. "What things, Jacob?" Jacob's gaze snapped up to meet Daniels' eyes, and for the first time, his expression hardened. "Things no one should ever see. But my mom, she was the one who found out. She was going to tell someone. She was going to take me away. I couldn't let her do that." The tension in the room was palpable. The walls seemed to close in on Officer Daniels as Jacob's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The more Daniels listened, the more he realized that this wasn't just a story of a troubled teen who had snapped. This was something far more sinister. Jacob's actions were the result of a deep, twisted obsession that had been festering beneath the surface for years. As the investigation delved deeper into Jacob's past, the police uncovered a series of disturbing journals and notes that Jacob had written over the years. These journals, hidden in a locked drawer in his bedroom, revealed a mind consumed by darkness, a mind that had been meticulously planning every move, every step. Jacob had written about his desires, his fantasies, his urge to control those around him, and his ultimate fear of being exposed. But it was the final entry in one of the journals that struck fear into the heart of every investigator involved in the case. In it, Jacob detailed his twisted fascination with power and control, and how he had planned his mother's death from the moment she started suspecting him. The entries were chilling, like the ramblings of a mind unraveling, consumed by an obsession with secrecy and revenge. As the police continued their search beneath the house, they uncovered even more disturbing evidence. The tunnels Jacob had built were not just random holes in the ground, they were carefully constructed, each leading to a different part of the house. It became clear that these tunnels had served as Jacob's personal prison, an escape from the outside world, where he could hide his darkest thoughts and desires. But it wasn't just the tunnels that made Jacob's plan so terrifying, it was what he had been hiding in them. The police discovered several hidden compartments beneath the floorboards, each containing grotesque artifacts. There were old photographs of people Jacob had once known, some of whom had vanished without a trace. There were fragments of old, broken toys, objects Jacob had collected over the years, preserving them like trophies. And in one compartment, they found something that chilled them to the core, a blood-stained knife. As they pieced together Jacob's disturbing collection, they realized something terrifying. Jacob hadn't just killed his mother in a fit of rage. He had planned every detail with precision. Emily's death was part of a larger, more disturbing pattern. And the police feared that this was only the beginning. The next twist in the case came when Jacob's father, Michael Williams, was brought in for questioning. Emily's estranged husband had been living in another state at the time of her death, but his connection to the family was crucial to understanding the full scope of the story. Michael, though initially cooperative, began to show signs of nervousness when asked about Jacob's behavior. It wasn't long before the police uncovered a shocking truth. Michael Williams had known about his son's disturbing tendencies long before Emily had discovered the tunnels. In fact, Michael had been the one who had encouraged Jacob's obsession with secrecy and control. He had believed that by hiding away in the tunnels, Jacob would become stronger, more powerful, a boy who could take control of his own destiny. But that encouragement had come with a price. Michael had turned a blind eye to the signs of violence in his son's behavior. He had allowed Jacob to hide his darkest secrets for years, not wanting to confront the truth of what his son was becoming. When confronted with this information, Michael's demeanor shifted. The man who had once appeared calm and collected now seemed shaken, his eyes darting nervously as if he had just realized the full extent of the monster his son had become. "Why didn't you do something?" Officer Daniels asked, his voice thick with anger. "Why didn't you stop him?" Michael swallowed hard, his face drained of color. "I thought he would grow out of it. I thought if I left him alone, he'd figure it out on his own. I never thought it would go this far." By now, the town of Brooksville had been consumed by the case. The media coverage was relentless, and the residents, once safe in their quiet suburban bubble, were now living in fear. The horror of what had transpired beneath the Williams house was too much to bear. But as the investigation drew to a close, one question remained unanswered. Jacob had confessed to killing his mother. He had described the planning, the methodical execution, and the moment of her death. But what he hadn't explained was the real reason behind his actions. Why had he targeted his mother? What had triggered his violent rage? As Officer Daniels continued to dig into Jacob's past, he stumbled upon an old family video. It was a birthday celebration from years ago, before the darkness had fully taken root in Jacob's heart. In the video, Jacob was laughing, playing with his mother, and enjoying the life that seemed so perfect. But there was one moment that caught Daniel's attention. In the background of the video, a shadow loomed over the family. It was Michael, standing off to the side, his face twisted in anger. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing. He was watching his family with a cold, calculating gaze. And that's when it hit Daniels like a bolt of lightning. Michael wasn't just an enabler, he was the source of Jacob's obsession. It was Michael who had shaped Jacob's warped view of the world, who had planted the seed of violence in his son's mind. Michael had allowed the darkness to grow unchecked. But the question still remained, was Jacob the only one responsible for the horrific acts beneath the house, or was there more to this twisted family dynamic than anyone could have imagined? The investigation was far from over. And as Officer Daniels stood in the quiet of the interrogation room, Staring at the cold, empty eyes of Jacob Williams, one thing became clear: this was only the beginning of a much darker story.